Ready for this.
Okay, that sounds great. You ready to go?
Yep, let's go.
Welcome to Senate Update, the Senate Legislative Update. Today is our fourth day involved in the deep into budgets, base budgets, and that has reduced, it's circumvented the standing committees, so we're not passing a lot of bills out of committee, and we're not passing a lot of bills off the floor of either the House or the Senate. So it's going to be slowing that process down. But the exercise, the information we're getting back, and we'll have Senator Hillier maybe give you an update, has been very positive on the space budget discussion.
It's been a challenge to spend that much time so intently on budgets, but I think as I visited with other legislators and with the general public, I think there's been a pretty good acceptance of looking into corners we haven't looked at before and asking the questions, did this really get what we wanted? Did it accomplish what we wanted? Do we need to change it? How we got to fine-tune it? Our plans were to finish this up by Monday night, and Monday we'll have an executive appropriations whereby we plan to approve the base budgets that the committees have all approved. We'll highlight in that meeting those changes the committees have recommended, and then basically our appropriations process will die down a little until we get our new revenue figures. And then the committees will come back again with the new revenue figures and then look at the questions that they've spent most of the sessions before, how to spend the limited money that we have. And so that'll happen then. So again, we're new at this, staff's new at it, but I think it has worked out remarkably well. And I would hope that we continue to do it this way, and I would hope that we learn things to make it work even more efficiently. I hope some of you have taken the chance to look at Colby and take a look at some of the budgets and go in depth on them. You can do that. It's all online, and I would hope the general public would do that and come back to us with suggestions that they see from it as well. So that's really our goal, and I think open up transparency to the legislature to let them look at that and help us out.
Have you found money that you can reallocate, or to what extent have you found money that you can reallocate?
You know, we got a report this morning that the staff said that looks like the committee's recommendation is about $10 million of ongoing and about $50 million of one time. They had recommended
50 or 15?
50. And again, how that finally hands out political, we'll have to see when we get the final in. But that's what the committees have. The staff themselves found, I think, 30 million ongoing, and if I remember right, it was 150 million one time, or 300 million one time that they found. And so there's some recommendations how we do it, and a lot of the money that we're finding will just actually be reallocated within the committee. And I'll give a good example was the veterans. When we heard that with a new director, they had gone through and combined and saved about $450,000. And I'm confident we'll take that now and look at new priorities within their budget. And that'll mean that we won't have to find that outside of their budget and bring it in. They'll be able to do it internally. So those are some of the monies we found will actually take the place of new revenue they would have been requesting to help us.
And that highlights a very significant dynamic with this base budget process is requests for additional money in a lot of these committees will be able to be done from within, and the new money that we have, we can focus on things like education and some other priorities that the legislature has. And so generally, we've had a very positive result from base budgeting. We also have our Assistant Appropriation Chair with us. Senator Stevenson, what's the feedback that you're getting on the base budget?
It's been positive. It depends a little on which committee. Some of the committees, like for instance higher ed, they have a lot of autonomy in the way they spend their budget, and so that's I don't think quite as productive as we are with maybe workforce services and economic development. Those are the committees that I'm on. Higher ed, given the institutions more time to present. They've got more in depth in what they're doing and what they want to do. And I think it's been productive that way. I think if you were a new legislator, it makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of things that you've got that it would take you years to pick up on.
And I have to give kudos to our fiscal analyst and his staff who have done a superb job under some extreme pressure in bringing us good information. And even the fiscal analyst has been on YouTube with some instructional videos for our legislators, and it would be good information for the public. So we invite you to look up Jonathan Ball on YouTube. He's got some instructional videos there.
I'd like to add one thing that Senator Stevenson said about higher ed. It's difficult where the schools have so much freedom in their budgets, but his suggestion, I think is a good one, is we ought to look at goals. And instead, rather than measuring the input and the money, look at the output. How many degrees are they really granting, and in what areas, and the time of completion, those kinds of things that we can look objectively on the outside and give them measurements and targets to meet. So I think as you look at the budgets, there's different ways to look at the budgets, and all of them are helpful.
We spent a lot of time looking at that yesterday, the different ways that you could measure what they actually do. And it was very beneficial. Some of the measurements become a little unequal. If you go to the University of Utah, where people move in, they work through a process and get an undergraduate degree in an average of about 6 years. Well, if you use 6 years as your average, and then you go to a place like Weber State, where it takes longer than that to get a 4-year degree because of the makeup of the student. And so it's very interesting to be able to put all those things together, and yet both institutions are very successful in what they do. And it's been a good process.
Thank you very much. So let's go to questions. Let's take our text message question first, and we'll ask our press.
Sure, you've got two
for
of them.
questions. We'll just start with one.
Okay. Are there any plans to pass a bill shutting off the NSA's utilities or other legislation intended to protect civil liberties?
Anybody like to take that question?
I have
Okay,
an
there you
NSA
go.
bill.
There it is.
I sat back here because I thought there would be
He didn't know there would be an
I knew
NSA
this
question.
question would be there. The answer to the question is no. And the MITA bill, we will run a MITA bill, and it will deal with the tax that we imposed on the NSA in Bluffdale last year. And there were apparently some commitments made from the Huntsman administration as to that there would be no taxes added to, no utility taxes. This deals strictly with the utility franchise tax. But there's no plan to shut the utilities off to the site that I know of. There's certainly not in the bill that I'm carrying.
So your bill takes the tax that was imposed last year and removes it?
That's what it does.
But I think also part of that question is regarding privacy. And I think that's a good debate. I know that's being had in the halls of Congress, and we're concerned about the privacy of our citizens and how much government can delve into their lives without them knowing. But that would be more of a federal issue because the NSA is a federal body. The legislature probably wouldn't pass any laws on a state basis to the degree that the federal government has. So we need to focus our attention on Washington, D.C. to change those laws.
Couldn't the same state sovereignty arguments that are made in that are applied to other areas be applied to that privacy issue?
Yeah, we could pass a resolution or a law, and maybe there is a resolution out there, I don't know, this year, because I know that's been an issue. And usually when there's some rumblings, we get some kind of a bill during the legislative session. But again, that's us trying to create some jurisdiction that then creates some tension between what we're doing and what the federal government is doing, and we're doing that with lands and some other issues. And so I just think there's so much of that jurisdictional contention that you can deal with at one time. Other questions?
President, you were involved in the U-Star audit last year, and it's come under some scrutiny this last week. And the question comes up, has U-Star given the state a good ROI? I mean, has the return on investment been worth it? And is it worth putting more money into a program that is, the allegations are, has overblown their accomplishments and underreported their liabilities?
That's a concern, and obviously that was a big discussion in committee 2 days ago, I believe it was, where U-Star was scrutinized quite heavily by members of the legislature, and should have been. The audit revealed some overstating of accomplishments, and so do we go ahead and just throw that program out at this point? I think the audit highlights the need to reevaluate and to bring some more accountability to that, or get rid of the program. And so that will be the question that I think that we'll be answering. I think the preference that we are at least landing on as far as the Senate is concerned, and we have a very capable senator working on this, and I'd suggest you talk to Senator Shizawa, who's running the bill. His bill will create some accountability and some reemphasis of the mission that the legislature passed as a policy 2005 and 2006. I can't remember what year it was when they passed U-Star. But the reality is there's been some significant impacts from that money. That just wasn't money that was wasted. We have some researchers here. They're doing some significant research now. What the expectation was is there'd be business entrepreneurial spin-offs, and that's where the results have been lacking. Any other questions on that?
Do you see any changes in the appropriation process for them then? I mean,
Yeah, I
they
think
brought in Greg Bell, you know, they made some changes.
I think at the end of the day, we're going to create some accountability and some more oversight, and we're going to give them another shot.
Yesterday, the governor talked about two things he wants to do immediately. I guess they don't need legislative approval necessarily, but they said they want to work with the legislature on restricting wood-burning fireplaces during the emissions season, and then moving quickly to adopt Tier 3 fuel and emission standards. What are the prospects for those in the Senate? What do you feel the prospects are for those in the Senate?
Senator Oakland, or I know Senator Valentine's been involved in this. Maybe you have both a comment on that.
Okay. The issue of the wood-burning stoves is probably a little bit more detailed than the governor could flesh out in his comments yesterday. His basic comment, as we heard it, was that he was going to prohibit wood-burning stoves throughout the entire inversion season in the non-attainment areas. If in fact that's the case, he's going to need some legislative authority, we think, to be able to do that. We're concerned about those individuals who have wood-burning stoves as their sole or primary source of heating. We're also concerned about what we mean by the inversion season. Many of us feel like, and I'm not speaking for the Senate on this one, but many of us feel like that a better resolution would be one that said that the BEQ should be tasked with projecting when inversions are going to be setting up and starting earlier on the restriction on the use of wood-burning stoves and wood-burning fireplaces. Because we can usually see a couple of days out when we're going to be headed to an inversion. So we now don't start our red burn days and our yellow burn days until we're already in the middle of it. And so we feel like if we had a prospect of doing a better predictive job of saying, you know, we're headed into inversion, we can see the high pressures are setting up and that the things are setting up for inversion, and we're going to see that happen in the next 2 days. We start the prohibitions earlier on in the process, rather than having a blanket across the entire inversion season. On the second issue, on the issue of the Tier 3 gasoline and Tier 3 cars, we've been doing some investigation and found that the technology has not yet caught up with the full Tier 3 ability. And so we're still trying to determine how that would actually work, and we believe that also will need legislative authority and legislative approval to do that. So we're trying to work with the governor's office to make certain that the initiatives that he's putting forward we can actually do, but the legislature does have to have a proper role to be able to make those things happen.
I think that pretty much covers it. I can see the legislature tackling the wood-burning stove issue after a very thorough study of kind of what's reasonable, and maybe something short of just saying all of the folks that have fireplaces in their homes, you're not going to be able to use them from 1st of November until the 1st of February or whatever that attainment season is declared. That may be a little bit heavy-handed. I think that there are some things that we can take a look at. And Senator Valentine, I think his comments were very pertinent. If we can kind of determine out there ahead of time what the times that we can make a difference, then maybe we can set some parameters that way. But just to be able to tell everybody that they don't use your fireplace in the winter, when else are they going to use it? So we need to be a little bit careful, a little bit reasonable about how we move forward with that recommendation. We're certainly willing to work with the governor to come up with something that is reasonable. And again, the Tier 3 fuels, obviously if we're going to meet the new standards that the feds have on air attainment issues, we're going to have more efficient fuels and more efficient cars. We probably aren't there quite yet, and we're still trying to find out where we are with the availability of Tier 3 fuels and when the cars that would be able to benefit and have the best emission as a result of that, when they're going to be available, if it's 2015 or 2017 or whenever that is. So we're looking at that very carefully and trying to make sure that we understand the issue completely. And before we move forward with legislation, I think we're going to want to make sure that we understand those issues very clearly.
We also have to determine whether we want to become an island state when it comes to our petroleum products. We import from Wyoming, Colorado, and Nevada petroleum products that are used in our motor fuels. California has a requirement that only fuels that meet those specifications can be used in California. We'd have to do the same thing because we would not have the same kind of following in some of the surrounding states. Until the federal standard becomes that standard, there is a problem with us becoming an island as far as the type of fuels that we could burn here. We presently have kind of an intermixing of our fuel systems between the respective refining states, and so that would be an issue that would have to be coordinated with our surrounding states.
So it sounds like even though those recommendations from the CAT team that the governor put together had near unanimous support, the Senate, or at least a couple of senators at least, have some pretty serious reservations about doing anything this year to move forward on that.
I wouldn't characterize it as.
No, I wouldn't either.
No, it's more of we're getting message that the science is, or not necessarily the science, but
The technology
the
is
technology
not quite there
really
yet.
isn't quite there yet, and that's something we have to find out first.
The interesting thing also is that the fuels coming out of our petroleum areas are actually low sulfur fuels to begin with. And so that actually helps us with that attainment. But the regulatory support that we need to put in place, we need to make certain that the technology is there to be able to enforce that type of requirement upon our manufacturers and upon our consumers who are using the product within our area.
Yes,
If DEQ wants to, or DAQ, I guess, wants to proceed with this through a rulemaking, would the Senate object to that?
We really feel like this is a policy decision the legislature needs to be a very strong part of. We're going to go hand in hand with the governor on this particular issue because clean air is important to all of us. We want to make certain that what we do will actually work and will actually make a difference in cleaning the air.
Other text question.
Got two more. Why is adding sexual orientation and gender identity not fair to Utah citizens? Which senators are in support of SB 100 and which aren't? For those of you who aren't, why? That's Senator Urquhart's bill on anti-discrimination.
Right. You want to give it a shot? I'd be happy to.
I think, the governor, in his address last night, put it very well. Our emphasis this legislative session is going to be to make sure that we defend the Third Amendment that we have to the Constitution, that is a man and a woman marriage. I think the rest of the discussions that we're having out there, I think the governor said we want to make sure that we're doing them, those discussions with great civility, with great respect to all of the different genders and everyone that's involved in the discussions. So any further discussion into that may involve some of those kinds of issues, if that detracts from the case that we're going to have come before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and then possibly even the Supreme Court, we want to stay away from some of the rhetoric that would detract from that case. And so I think it's very important that we stay focused, and we're going to try to make sure that that's our emphasis, and we're going to try to continue to have that emphasis until we see what happens with the courts, until they make a decision. And then the discussions and the considerations of these other bills may come forward and become more important once that decision is made.
What's the other question?
The other question is for Senator Hilliard from Jason Williams, who you're very familiar with. He wants to know if there are any surprises in the budget appropriations considerations so far, and if there were surprises, what were they? Base budget review specifically.
I really have let the committees work, and so I have really not followed it day to day. I would hope that by Monday, when we get the report of the committees, we'll be able to find out. So I've just kind of let it go, and I can't really tell you any that I've found that are really surprising, but I suspect we'll have Monday.
But it's only day 4, Jason.
Yeah.
There'll always be surprises. Jason. We all know that.
We had one agency that said they needed no new money. That was a surprise.
Any other questions?
You guys had leadership meeting this morning. Is that right?
Yes.
What was discussed? What was sort of the outcome of those meetings? Where are we on sort of the big? I think Medicaid was on the agenda.
No discussion.
Senator Okerlund conducted that meeting.
We talked about some of these budget items that we've talked about today. We had a great presentation by Jonathan Ball, our fiscal analyst, who again talked to us about the process. We had a kind of a critique from joint leadership, both sides of both houses, about how this process is working, whether we like it or whether we don't. It seems that generally the feeling is that it's working very well. Jonathan Ball also reported that we've got 305 bills now drafted, and they're going to be waiting for us at the end of this process. Fiscal notes on about 95% of those already. So we're going to have a bunch of bills that are going to hit the board and a bunch of ideas that we're going to be working on very quickly once we get through this appropriations process.
I'm trying to think through that.
Yeah, that was kind of the main discussion that we had.
There was
this
some
morning.
discussion about the educational proposal that's coming, that's originating in the House. I think that's at least out there in the public right now, and so there'll be some.
Basically being caught up to date on that, because a lot of us didn't know about that.
Well, yeah, we didn't know much about that, but we've got some commitments now to work together on some of those education issues.
We need to get you guys a caucus, they're gonna start.
Okay. Great, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.